Hello everyone, welcome back. This is alrav from Quebec, Canada, the author and creator of Alcatraz the Protector slash Alcatraz the Protector. And for today's video, we'll be doing something a little different. I've already talked about the franco-belgian albums on my videos before, but I've barely scratched the surface on American comics and my thought on what the future of this particular comic book format will be. So I figured I would do a video based on that. So before I get into the topic of what's going to happen next, I'm going to go take a deep dive into my own personal history and recollection of the traditional monthly floppies and American comics as a whole. When I was a kid, I was a huge American comic fan, especially a Marvel fan, especially a Spider-Man fan. And one thing I can say is that I have a soft spot for the good old monthly floppies. I grew up with both of them as well as the French traduction paperback that they would do that consists of these compilations of many different type of stories that would be compiled together into one volume. And what I love about old school American comics, besides the characters and the shared universe aspect, is that it felt like an adventure. Like nowadays, number ones are frequent and most stories are built with a trade paperback format in mind, so there's not much of a purpose behind collecting the monthly floppies. But back then, in the 90s and before, it used to be a very rare phenomenon to pick up a number one. For most casual readers like me and others, it would be a random number, like let's say 67, issue 134, issue 256, issue 279, issue 436, and so on and forth. But at the time, it wasn't much of an issue because even if you jump to the reading in the middle of a storyline, there was always a nod that this particular issue that you hold was the first appearance of a particular new character or a costume or even a location, and it was these number ones within the stories themselves that drove the value of these comics and in turn made them into impulse purchase whenever you would see them in store shelves at the various stores that would sell these sort of comics, which is kind of a contrast with today. So there is this misconception that number ones tend to sell the most and then the subsequent issues does a drop off, but it is a common mistake to be found because it really is the first appearances that are the most valuable comics. Like for instance, if you really wanted to start reading a character like Spider-Man from the very beginning, you would actually need to track down a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15, which is when Spider-Man made his first appearance in a magazine. And after that, there's the various villains from the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko era of the character and the subsequent runs. So that would be the actual valuable comics to own, not the fake number ones that you see very often with modern comics. This misconception with number ones, among various different factors, are one of the main reasons why all the monthly floppies of American comics are slowly dying out as a result. And because of that, for most creators, they won't have much of a choice but to pivot their businesses across different comic book format. And so I've already talked about my personal preference for franco-belgian albums before, but to be fair, there are other alternatives as well. If you were to ask me which one would be the ideal format for American creators to move to, There are no direct right answers, but I can look at each one of these individually to determine which one would be the best for American creators, both writers and artists. So let's get right into it. So are webcomics the future? The short answer is I don't think so personally. I've already made a video about how blog comics are far better alternative, and in all honesty, webcomics have massive problems in terms of the actual production, that unless you have the ideal circumstances to keep producing them on a weekly basis or more, you're going to be grinding forever with diminishing results, so I would not recommend it. So do I think graphic novels are the future then? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. They are okay in my book. Like, they are not particularly great for serialized long-term storytelling, but for self-contained works and masterpieces such as Mouse, Persepolis, those type of comics, they are good in that sort of category, which is exactly why I think they might be viable for some creators out there. Not all of them, but I think they are okay overall. So, do I think the future of American comics consists of a transition toward manga? I'm going to be nice, but much like webcomics, the short answer is no, just don't. Even though mangas are popular, very widespread, and very iconic, the problem with mangas is that once again, it really comes down to the environment under which the creators operate, and most American creators would be fundamentally incompatible with the way mangas are produced, the fast production schedules and stuff. It is sort of the same problem that with webcomics, but much worse so because of the language and cultural barriers amongst many other factors. This is why I believe personally that manga should remain a Japanese specialty first and foremost, so I would discourage a transition toward manga specifically because of that. Lastly, do I think American creators should move toward the franco-belgian albums format? The short answer is I've already talked about my personal preference for them personally, and do I think it's a good fit? I honestly think that it would be the best one for American creators to do so far, simply because it shifts comics away from a quantity-driven output, which much often like it is, toward a quality-driven output in which creator-owned is the default and authorship is at the center of the experience. So you get fewer pages and fewer stories, but in exchange for higher quality, more consistency between tones and volumes, and overall a more artistic approach and mindset toward comics to really make it as an art form and not just as a springboard for all sorts of multimedia stuff that are more or less quickly forgotten about once they air. So this is the reason why I personally think that it would be the best transition medium for American creators, both writers and artists. And honestly, I think this should have been the standard a long time ago. So that way you would have at least preserved the value of most of your purchase. So overall, for American creators in the future, with the American monthly floppies slowly going out, I honestly think that albums or graphic novels, either of them or both, are going to be the main format for American comics in the future, while things such as mangas and webcomics, I honestly do not recommend them simply because of the fundamental incompatibilities with the fast-paced production schedules that this thing requires, as well as the language and cultural barriers amongst many other factors. So this would be the best place to be and not these. So with that being said, thanks for watching and let me know what you think in the commentary section below. As always, look forward to Art Algatraz le Protecteur / Algatraz le Protecteur stuff on my Substack. The first issue is available for free there, as always, alongside its blog comics companion, and a second issue is coming out this year. More details are in the links in the description below or on my channel's page. And with that being said, again, thanks for watching, and we'll see one another very soon. Enjoy the reading.